The first slap wasn't a hand. It was a voice loud enough to cut through the ER's alarms and the squeal of gurney wheels. Hey, you, black scrubs, don't walk away from me. Amina Miles stopped mid-stride beside Trauma Bay 3, a sealed bag of blood hanging from her gloved hand. The fluorescent lights turned everyone's skin a sickly shade, but the redness in Sergeant Cole Rayner's face still looked violent. He stood planted at the nurse's station like he owned the floor, thick neck bulging above his collar, one hand resting on his duty belt as if it was a throne armrest. Amina's eyes went to the man on the bed behind her, 40-something, pale, chest rising in stuttering, shallow motions. The monitor stuttered with him, blood pressure dropping. I'm in the middle of a transfusion, she said, voice even. Step back. Rayner smiled as if she performed for him. Step back? He repeated, turning to the paramedic who stood uncertainly near the wall. You hear that? Nurse thinks she gets to give orders. The waiting room beyond the double doors was packed, a humid stew of coughing and crying and muttered prayers. People looked up when the cop's voice rose, drawn in by the old reflex authority speaking. Trouble coming. Amina felt it like a shift in air pressure. The ER had its own laws, its own hierarchy, but the uniform tried to rewrite everything it touched. A doctor approached the station, chart in hand. Sergeant, what's? Rayner held up a finger without looking at him. Not talking to you, talking to her. Amina set the blood bag onto the counter beside the bay, careful, precise, as if her hands were made of glass. She pulled her gloves off slowly and tossed them in the biohazard bin. Every movement was deliberate, not timid, controlled. Like someone refusing to give an audience the satisfaction of speed. I'm Amina Miles, she said. RN, this is an active trauma. If you need something, you can speak to charge. Rayner stepped closer, invading the small space behind the counter. The smell of his aftershave mixed with antiseptic and sweat. Show me your badge, he said. My hospital badge, Amina asked. No, he snapped. Your real one. ID, now. Amina's brow tightened a fraction. I'm not required to show you personal identification to do my job. His smile fell away. The softness in his expression drained as if someone pulled a plug. That's so, he said. That's what you people always say. The sentence landed like a wet rag across the room. The doctor froze. A pair of nursing students near the supply cabinet went still, their eyes wide above their masks. Amina didn't react outwardly, but something in her gaze hardened, the calm shifting into something denser. Rayner leaned in. You refusing a lawful order? This is a hospital, Amina said, not a traffic stop. Rayner's hand moved quick, practiced toward her chest. He seized the edge of her scrub top where her name tag hung. Amina grabbed his wrist immediately, not twisting, not striking, just stopping. Do not touch me, she said, voice low. The contact was a mistake. His eyes lit with a certain kind of hunger, the kind that needed justification. Assaulting an officer, he said, loudly, as if announcing a prize. You all saw that? Amina released his wrist. Her hands lifted slightly, palms visible, a gesture for the room, not for him. I'm asking you to step back, she said. You are interfering with care. Rayner turned his head as if listening to a voice only he could hear, then nodded at nothing, as though his next decision had been approved by some invisible tribunal. Put your hands behind your back, he said. Amina stared at him. Absolutely not. His voice became sharp enough to cut bone. Hands, behind, your back. Amina looked past him to the security desk at the end of the hallway. 2 hospital security officers sat there, their radios clipped, their bodies suddenly very aware of being watched. One of them started to stand, then sat back down, caught between policy and fear. Charge Nurse Vanessa Ortiz rushed forward, her face tight. Sergeant Rayner, she's on assignment. If you have a concern, we can. Rayner flicked his gaze to Vanessa like she was a fly. Stay out of it, ma'am. This doesn't concern you. It concerns the patient, Vanessa said, and her voice trembled with anger. Rayner ignored her. His fingers snapped open a pair of cuffs from his belt, with an ugly metallic clack, the sound drawing more eyes from the waiting area. Amina didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She said, I need your name and badge number stated clearly. Rayner blinked as if she'd spoken another language, then laughed. You think you're recording me? You think anyone cares what you need? Amina's eyes lifted to the small black dome camera on the ceiling of the station, then to another in the corridor, then to the wall monitor that showed the bay feeds. She was mapping, calculating. Her pulse did not show in her hands. "I'm asking for your name," she repeated, "for the record." Rayner stepped around the counter, coming into the restricted side without hesitation. "Sergeant Cole Rayner," he said, almost spitting the words. "Badge 214, and you're about to learn what happens when you don't cooperate." Amina turned slightly, glancing toward Trauma Bay 3. The patient's monitor alarmed again. "Urgent." The doctor cursed under his breath and moved toward the bed. Amina reached for the blood bag. Rayner grabbed her arm, hard, fingers digging into muscle like clamps. Amina's head turned slowly toward him. Her voice dropped to something quiet and lethal. "Remove your hand," she said. "Now." Rayner yanked her away from the bay. The motion jolted the IV pole, making the blood bag swing. The doctor snapped. "Stop, she needs." Rayner barked. "Back off." And the doctor, for one stunned second, actually hesitated. That hesitation cost time. It cost oxygen. It cost the patient a sliver of life the ER didn't have to spare. Vanessa moved in, trying to wedge between them. "Sergeant, this is assault." Rayner shoved Vanessa with his shoulder. Not enough to knock her down, but enough to remind everyone he could. Amina's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't flail. She didn't cry out. She didn't give him the footage he wanted. Rayner forced her arms behind her back. The cuffs bit down over her wrists with a click that echoed against tile. A hush rippled outward, the whole hall listening. Amina's voice remained steady. "You are unlawfully detaining a hospital employee performing critical care." Rayner leaned close to her ear. "Say it again," he murmured. "Say unlawful one more time. I dare you." Amina met Vanessa's eyes. Vanessa's face had gone pale. The doctor's jaw was clenched so hard it shook. Amina said to Vanessa, "Tell Dr. Klein to take over Bay 3. Document the interruption. Preserve camera footage from 1942 onward. Call administration. Now." Rayner's head snapped. "You don't get to give orders." Amina didn't look at him. "And call my emergency contact," she added. "The number is in my wallet." Rayner yanked her scrub pocket open with 2 fingers, searching. His hand brushed her hip. His smile returned briefly, cruel. "Emergency contact?" he said. "What, your boyfriend gonna come down here and act tough?" Amina's gaze stayed flat. "My husband," she said. Rayner snorted. "Sure." He pulled her wallet from her back pocket like it belonged to him. He flipped it open, rifling through cards. Amina watched his hands, the way he handled her life. She said softly, "Keep going. Make sure you touch everything." Rayner paused, eyes narrowing. "What'd you say?" Amina didn't repeat it. She just looked at the body camera on his chest, the red light blinking. Rayner glanced down, then reached up and snapped the camera off. The silence after that click felt like a door locking. Vanessa gasped. "You can't. I can do whatever I want in my jurisdiction," Rayner said. "This is my city." Amina's eyes didn't change. But something in the air did. A shift, subtle, like a storm arriving without wind. Rayner grabbed her by the elbow and hauled her toward the ambulance bay. The corridor stretched long, lined with posters about hand hygiene and patient rights, the irony glaring and useless. Staff parted like a tide. Some stared, horrified. Some looked away to save themselves. Amina's shoes squeaked against tile. Her shoulders were straight, her chin level. The cuffs pulled at her wrists, but she didn't slump. A teenage boy in the waiting room stood, eyes wide. "She didn't do nothing," he blurted. Rayner swung his head toward him. "Sit down unless you want a matching set." The boy sat so fast his knees knocked the chair. Amina's mouth tightened. "Threatening civilians?" she said calmly. "Add it to your list." Rayner stopped walking and turned her toward him, forcing her to face his chest. His voice was low now, meant only for her. "You don't know your place," he said. "That's the problem. Y'all get jobs, uniforms, little titles, and you think it makes you equal." Amina's eyes held his without blinking. "It makes me necessary," she said. "You're interrupting a transfusion because your ego is fragile." Rayner's jaw flexed. The muscles in his cheek jumped. He pushed her through the ambulance bay doors into the humid night air. Sirens washed the parking lot in pulses of red and blue. Rain had just fallen. Asphalt gleamed under streetlights like black glass. Two patrol officers stood by their cruiser, confused. They straightened when they saw Raynor dragging a cuffed nurse out of the hospital. "What's this?" one of them asked. "Resisting," Raynor said. "Assault. Obstruction. Probably drugs, too. She's got that look." Amina's voice carried through the open bay. "There is no probable cause." His body camera was turned off in the corridor. "Hospital cameras are still recording." One of the patrol officers hesitated. "Sarge, hospital staff said she was." Raynor cut him off. "You questioning me?" The officer's mouth closed. His partner looked down at the ground. Raynor shoved Amina against the side of the cruiser, metal cold against her cheek. Her breath fogged on the window. "Search her," Raynor ordered. The younger patrol officer shifted uncomfortably. "We need a female." Raynor leaned toward him, voice like a blade. "You need to do what I tell you." The officer's eyes flicked to Amina's face. Amina's gaze met his. Not pleading, not angry. Just stating, without words, that he would be accountable for whatever he chose next. The officer swallowed. "Sarge, hospital security's coming." Footsteps pounded behind them. Two security officers emerged, radios crackling. Their faces were tight with panic. "Sergeant," one of them said. "Administration says." Raynor snapped. "Administration can kiss my," Amina spoke over him. "Ask him why he turned off his body camera," she said. "Ask him what he took from my wallet." Raynor's hand tightened around the wallet in his fist. He shoved it into his pocket like contraband. Vanessa burst out of the bay doors behind security, breathless, eyes blazing. "I called the nursing supervisor. The patient in Bay 3 crashed after you pulled her." Raynor rounded on Vanessa. "You want to join her?" Vanessa flinched, but she didn't back down. "This is going to cost someone their license," she said, voice shaking. "And it won't be her." Raynor's smile was small and mean. "You people always think there's consequences," he said. "You don't understand. I am the consequence." Amina's face turned slightly, cheeks still against the cruiser. Her voice was quiet enough to force everyone to lean in, including him. "Keep saying that," she murmured. "Say it on camera." Raynor's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered thin, fast, like a shadow crossing a wall. "What are you?" he demanded. "Some activist," Amina didn't answer. She closed her eyes for 1 second, a breath drawn deep, then opened them again. A phone rang. Not hers. Not Vanessa's. Raynor's. He ignored it. It rang again. He cursed and yanked the phone out, glancing at the screen. The color drained slightly from his face. The name displayed there was not one most people would ever see. He swiped to answer anyway, trying to recover his swagger. "Yeah," he barked. "Who thee?" A voice came through the speaker, amplified by the night air. Controlled. Low. Not angry. Worse than angry. "Put my wife on the phone." Raynor's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Vanessa's eyes snapped to Amina's face. Amina's expression didn't change, but her shoulders lowered a fraction, as if she'd just set down a weight she'd been holding for months. Raynor's voice became defensive. "Who is this?" The voice on the phone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You turned off your body camera in a hospital corridor," it said. "You removed personal property from a restrained medical professional. You interfered with a critical transfusion. You are standing in the lit parking lot with multiple cameras and witnesses. Put her on." The phone. Raynor looked around, suddenly aware of every eye, every lens, every angle. He swallowed, then shoved the phone toward Amina's face like it burned him. Amina leaned her head away from the cruiser just enough to speak. "I'm here," she said. The voice softened the shade, but stayed still. "Are you injured?" "No," Amina said. "Vanessa got shoved. The patient in Bay 3 crashed when he pulled me away." A beat of silence. A breath taken somewhere far away. "Stay calm," the voice said. "Do not resist anything. I'm on my way. Do you understand?" Amina's gaze held steady on the night. "I understand." Raynor snatched the phone back, rage flooding into the fear. "Listen," he snapped into it. "I don't care who you think you are. This is police business." The voice cut him off like a door slammed. "This is federal business now." Rayner laughed, forced and sharp. Federal? What, you calling the FBI on me because your wife can't? You already did, the voice said. Rayner froze. The voice continued, calm as a judge reading a sentence. My security detail has your location. The special agent in charge of the field office has your name. The U.S. attorney is being contacted. You will not touch my wife again. Rayner's lips peeled back. Who the hell are you? The answer came without flourish. The director. The word hit the parking lot like a weight dropped from height. The younger patrol officer's eyes widened. The security guards stiffened like they'd been struck. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth, not in surprise at Amina at the sudden realization of how far beyond their little hospital hallway this moment had just reached. Rayner's face went blank. Then he tried to fill it back in with arrogance, like plaster over a crack. You think you can scare me with some fake? Amina spoke quietly, almost tender. He doesn't scare, she said. He documents. Rayner's throat bobbed. His gaze shot to Amina's hands behind her back, the cuffs still locked. Amina's voice stayed level. Unlock them, she said. Rayner's hand hovered over his keyring. He hesitated, looking around as if searching for someone to confirm reality. He didn't find anyone willing. A black SUV rolled into the lot without sirens, headlights cutting clean lines across wet pavement. Another followed, then a third. They parked with precision, angled like a perimeter. Doors opened. Men and women stepped out, no uniforms, no flashing lights, just posture and purpose. Earpieces, jackets that hung heavy, eyes scanning everything at once. One of them approached Rayner. Sergeant Cole Rayner? She asked. Her tone was polite in the way a scalpel was polite. Rayner bristled. Who are you? She held up a credential wallet briefly, just long enough for the gold seal to catch the light. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Rayner scoffed, but his voice cracked. This is my arrest. She assaulted. Your body camera, the agent said, cutting him off, was turned off. Hospital cameras were not. You removed personal property from a restrained subject. That wallet in your pocket. Hand it over. Rayner's jaw clenched. You don't have jurisdiction. The agent's eyes didn't blink. Hand it over. Another figure emerged from the nearest SUV. He wasn't tall in a theatrical way. He didn't radiate intimidation like a movie villain. He looked like a man who lived in conference rooms and secure briefings, whose body carried the tension of decisions that ruined careers and saved lives. Amina's eyes found him immediately, not with relief, with recognition, the kind that came from years of seeing the same steady presence across kitchen tables and crisis calls. He walked toward them, brain light glinting off his wedding band. Behind him, 2 agents flanked, scanning the lot. A 4th stayed near the SUV, hand resting near their jacket line. The man stopped in front of Rayner and Amina. His gaze moved first to Amina's wrists, cuffed behind her back. Then to the red marks rising under the metal. Then to Rayner's face. Unlock them, he said. Rayner's mouth opened. No sound. His eyes started to the agent who'd identified herself. She nodded once. Not permission. Confirmation. Rayner fumbled with his keys. His fingers shook. The cuffs released with a click, the metal falling away like dead weight. Amina flexed her wrists slowly, feeling blood return. She didn't rub them, she didn't dramatize. She simply let the marks show. The man turned to her. Are you hurt? He asked again, quieter. Amina's voice remained composed. No. His eyes softened for a beat. Then they hardened again, sliding back to Rayner. What happened in the corridor? He asked. Rayner's voice rose too loud, too fast. She got mouthy. She grabbed me. Amina spoke, and her words were the opposite of chaos. He demanded my personal ID while I was administering blood, she said. He grabbed my arm, pulled me away from an active trauma patient, then cuffed me. He turned off his body camera. He took my wallet. He threatened civilians and hospital staff. Rayner snapped. Lies. Vanessa stepped forward, voice breaking with fury. It's not lies, he shoved me. The patient coded. The man's gaze flicked to Vanessa. Name? He asked. Vanessa Ortiz, she said. Charge nurse. He nodded, storing it like evidence. Amina added. Trauma Bay 3. Patient name is Samuel Decker. Massive GI bleed. He was unstable. The man's jaw tightened. He looked at Rayner again. What's the status of that patient now? He asked, not to Rayner, but to the air. One of the agents had a phone pressed to their ear. They answered without looking up. Patient is being worked. CPR in progress. A flicker crossed the man's face. Not shock, calculation. The moment shifted from personal to procedural, the way a machine shifted gears. He addressed the agent who'd first approached Rayner. Secure his firearm, he said, voice controlled. Secure his phone. Secure the wallet. Get hospital footage. Now. Rayner snapped upright, voice sharp with panic. You can't take my weapon. The agent moved in. Place your hands on the hood, she said. Rayner's eyes bulged. This is outrageous. The man cut in, voice low, clean. Sergeant Rayner, you are not being arrested yet, he said. You are being disarmed while allegations of violence under color of law are investigated. If you resist, you will be arrested. Do you understand? Rayner's face twitched. You can't. The man's gaze held his like a lock. Do you understand? Rayner's breath came ragged. Yes, he spat. He placed his hands on the cruiser hood. The agent removed his weapon with practiced speed, removed his cuffs, removed his phone, removed the wallet from his pocket. She placed each item into evidence bags as if she'd done it 1,000 times, because she had. Amina stood beside her husband, wrists marked, posture steady. The staff watching from the bay doors didn't cheer. Nobody celebrated. The air was too heavy for that. What they felt was something different, gravity returning after chaos. A hospital administrator hurried out, tie crooked, rain spotting his blazer. What is going on? He demanded, voice attempting authority and finding none. The man turned his gaze to him. Identify yourself, he said. I'm Martin Feld, the administrator said. Chief Operations, Mr. Furr. Feld, the man said. Your security failed to intervene when a sworn officer interfered with active medical care. Your staff were threatened and assaulted. Your cameras recorded it. I need immediate access to all footage and internal incident logs. If any footage disappears, the FBI will treat it as obstruction. Martin Feld paled. This is a hospital. We have privacy laws. We also have federal statutes, the man said. You can cooperate willingly or under subpoena, your choice. Martin's mouth opened, then closed. He nodded sharply, retreating like a man backing away from a ledge. Rayner, still braced on the hood, barked. This is a setup. You think because your husband's some big shot you can… Amina's voice cut through him. Stop talking, she said quietly. Rayner turned his head, sneering. Make me. The man stepped closer to Rayner, close enough that the rain beaded on both their collars. His voice didn't rise. It slowed, heavy as stone. You don't understand what just happened, he said. You turned off your camera because you believed the uniform made you untouchable. You believed the hallway was yours. It wasn't. It belonged to a patient bleeding out. It belonged to a nurse doing her job. And now it belongs to evidence. Rayner's nostrils flared. Who are you two? The man answered, not louder, but final. Elias Miles, he said. Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Rayner's face drained fully now, the last of his false confidence leaking out. The younger patrol officer looked like he might be sick. Amina's ring caught the ambulance bay light when she lifted her hands, flexing her wrists again. The metal had left crescents in her skin. Those marks would photograph clean. The agents moved with sudden, coordinated speed. One stepped inside the hospital with Vanessa, heading toward the security office. Another remained with Martin Feld, guiding him toward an administrative entrance. The agent with Rayner's weapon secured it in the SUV. Elias turned slightly toward Amina, lowering his voice. I need you to go inside, he said. Get evaluated. Then write your account while it's fresh. Dates, times, exact phrasing. Amina's eyes held his. Bay 3, she said. I know, Elias replied. I already have agents going to the trauma desk. I'm not letting that disappear. Amina's throat moved with a tight swallow. He pulled me off a transfusion, she said, voice barely above the rain. He did it because he could. Elias's face stayed controlled, but something in his eyes deepened. Not anymore, he said. Amina looked toward the bay doors. Staff clustered there, faces pale, hands clasped. Their fear hadn't vanished. It had simply found a shape. She walked back inside without hesitation, past the cameras, past the stunned patients in the waiting room. People stared at her wrists, at the red marks, at the way she didn't hide them. Inside, the ER was louder now, more alarms, faster footsteps, voices snapping orders. The smell of blood was stronger. Trauma Bay 3 was chaos. Amina moved to the doorway, not entering, just watching for 1 second. Samuel Decker's chest rose under compressions. A doctor barked for epinephrine. A respiratory therapist squeezed a bag valve mask. Someone shouted his blood pressure. It was slipping. Vanessa's eyes met Amina's. Vanessa looked exhausted and furious and terrified all at once. Amina's voice stayed steady. "I'm here," she said. Vanessa swallowed hard. "They're trying," she whispered. "We're trying." Amina nodded once. She didn't cry. Not yet. That would come later, in private, when the adrenaline drained and the meaning sank in. She turned away and went straight to occupational health. A nurse there, hands shaking, took photos of her wrists and filled out forms with ink that smeared slightly because her fingers trembled. Outside, in the rain-lit lot, Rayner was no longer a man in control. He was a man pinned under the weight of procedure. An agent read him his rights when he tried to leave. "I'm not under arrest," he shouted. "You are being detained," the agent corrected, "pending investigation into civil rights violations and obstruction." Rayner barked a laugh that sounded like it hurt. "Civil rights? For her? She assaulted me." The agent didn't react. She only said, "We have video." Rayner's eyes flicked toward the hospital cameras he'd forgotten, toward the ceiling domes that had watched everything he thought he owned. He licked his lips. This is politics. Elias stood a few steps away, phone pressed to his ear, speaking to someone who didn't need introductions. "Yes, Attorney General," he said. "Yes, tonight. I want a Civil Rights Division team looped in. I want a preservation order for all hospital digital systems. I want an independent review of the department. And I want the U.S. attorney prepared for an emergency hearing if local judges stall." He listened, expression unreadable, then spoke again. He turned his body camera off. "We have hospital footage of the arrest, multiple witnesses. There is a patient impact." He ended the call. The rain kept falling, steady, indifferent. The police chief arrived 20 minutes later in a black sedan, tie tight, face tight. Chief Randall Givens stepped out with the posture of a man used to rooms changing temperature when he entered. He walked straight toward Elias, ignoring the agents as if they were furniture. "Director Miles," he said, forcing a smile. "We can handle this internally. Sergeant Rayner is one of my men. If there's an issue, we'll—" Elias's gaze didn't soften. "Your officer turned off his body camera in a hospital corridor," he said. "He interfered with medical care. He unlawfully restrained a nurse. If you handle this internally, it becomes your crime too." Gibbons's smile faltered. "Now hold on. You're accusing me." Elias held up a hand, stopping him. "I'm not accusing you," he said. "I'm informing you. Your Internal Affairs Division will preserve all data and communications related to Sergeant Rayner for the last 2 years. You will not notify him of any pending actions. You will not contact witnesses. If you do, we will treat it as witness tampering." Givens's eyes narrowed. "This is overreach." Elias's voice stayed calm. "It's oversight." Givens looked past Elias to where Rayner stood guarded. Shoulders hunched now, fury turned inward like a caged animal. Something passed between them. History, protection, mutual dirt. Elias watched that silent exchange with clinical attention. "You know him," Elias said. Givens snapped. "Of course I know him. He's a sergeant." Elias nodded slowly. "Then you know what he's been allowed to do," he said. Givens's jaw clenched. "We don't need federal agents swarming my city because of a misunderstanding." Elias's gaze sharpened. "A misunderstanding doesn't leave cuff marks on my wife," he said. "A misunderstanding doesn't shut off a body camera. A misunderstanding doesn't pull a nurse away from a bleeding patient." Givens's nostrils flared. "Your wife?" he repeated, voice sour. "So that's what this is. Personal." Elias didn't deny it. He didn't accept it. He reframed it into something heavier. "It's personal for every family that's been told to shut up," he said. It's personally for every nurse who's been treated like property because someone with a badge wanted to feel powerful. It's personal for the patient in Bay 3, who may die because your officer needed to dominate someone in front of an audience. Givens' eyes flicked toward the hospital doors, and for 1 second, fear surfaced fear, not of Elias's words, but of what those words would unlock. Elias turned slightly and spoke to an agent. Get the chief's phone metadata on preservation, he said. Tonight. Givens stiffened. You can't. An agent stepped forward. We can request it, she said, or we can compel it. The chief stared at Elias, then looked away, as if the rain suddenly fascinated him. Inside the hospital, Amina sat in a small office with a pen and a blank incident report. Her hands were steady now, but her heart wasn't. She wrote times, words, exact phrases, the way he said, you people. The way he grabbed her name tag. The way the cuffs clicked. The moment the body camera went dark. She wrote it all with a precision that didn't come from nursing alone. Vanessa sat across from her, knees bouncing. I keep thinking, Vanessa whispered. If that had been me, he would have yelled, but he wouldn't have cuffed me. Amina kept writing. He chose, she said quietly. Vanessa swallowed. I'm sorry, she said. I froze for a second. Amina's pen didn't pause. Freezing keeps people alive sometimes, she said. It also keeps systems alive. We're not freezing now. A knock came at the door. A federal agent stepped in, respectful, direct. Ms. Miles, she said, we need your consent for medical records related to injuries and for footage release. Also, the U.S. attorney wants to speak to you by phone. Amina set her pen down. Put it through, she said. On the phone, the U.S. attorney's voice was brisk, controlled. Ms. Miles, I need you to understand we're treating this as potential deprivation of rights under color of law, he said. We'll need your statement, and we'll need witness statements fast. The officers' union will move quickly to spin this. Amina's eyes drifted to the glass window of the office, where she could see the ER beyond patients, staff, fluorescent light, life continuing under pressure. Understood, she said. And the patient? The U.S. attorney asked. Bay 3. Amina's throat tightened. I don't have an update yet, she said. We do, the U.S. sprout. Attorney replied, and his tone shifted slightly heavier. He's alive, critical. They got a pulse back. Amina closed her eyes for 1 second. The breath she released was silent, but it carried a weight she hadn't allowed herself to feel until now. Thank you, she said. The agent in the doorway watched Amina's face carefully, as if measuring the shape of her resilience. Outside, the night accelerated. A search warrant team arrived before midnight for Rayner's locker, his patrol car, his home. Not because of vengeance, because of pattern. Agents moved with gloved hands and printed forms, the quiet machinery of consequence. Rayner shouted in the parking lot when he realized he wasn't being sent home with a slap on the wrist. You can't do this, he yelled. I'm a cop, an agent replied flatly. That's why we can. When they led him to an SUV, not a patrol car, not his familiar territory, his shoulders shook with rage. This is because she married up, he spat. That's all this is. Elias watched him for a long moment, rain sliding down his face. It's because you married down to your own worst instincts, Elias said quietly, and you kept choosing them. Rayner lunged a half step, and 2 agents caught him immediately, folding him back with ease. The power he'd used on others vanished when faced with people trained to contain him without fear. The next morning, the footage hit internal channels before it hit the public. A hospital employee had tried to be helpful, had tried to show a friend, had tried to whisper the story into the world like gossip. By noon, it wasn't gossip. It was proof. The video showed Rayner at the nurse's station, face red, posture aggressive. It caught his hand on Amina's arm, the yank away from the bay, the cuffs closing. It caught Vanessa being shoved. It caught Amina's calm voice asking for his name and batch number. It caught the moment his body camera went off, because even though his camera did, the hospitals didn't. The city's social media flooded with rage and disbelief and old memories. Names resurfaced, complaints filed and ignored. Settlements with non-disclosure agreements, a pattern that had been invisible because it had been normalized. By evening, protesters gathered outside the police department. Not a riot, a vigil with signs and candles and faces drawn hard from years of swallowing anger. Nurses stood in scrubs holding posters that said patience over power. Families held photos of sons stopped for nothing. A pastor held a microphone and read the names of complaints that never made it past a desk. Inside the federal building, the machinery kept moving. A grand jury convened within days. Witnesses testified under oath. Doctors described the patient crash, the seconds lost. Nurses described the fear and humiliation, the way the ER fell silent under a badge. Security described the paralysis of policy colliding with ego. The police chief tried to distance himself publicly. He held a press conference with a prepared statement and a stiff smile. "We take these allegations seriously," Chief Givens said, eyes fixed on the cameras. "We will cooperate with all investigations." A reporter asked, "Chief, did you know Sergeant Rayner had prior complaints?" Givens' smile tightened. "I can't comment on personnel matters." Another reporter pressed, "How many complaints?" Givens' jaw flexed. Next question. The next question was worse. "Chief, why did your department's body camera audit show repeated malfunctions on Sergeant Rayner's footage over the last year?" The chief's eyes flicked, a microsecond of panic. Technical issues happen. Behind the scenes, agents pulled audit logs. They pulled deletion requests. They pulled text messages. They pulled the quiet signatures that turned misconduct into routine. 3 weeks after the hospital night, federal agents returned to the police department with a different posture. Not just a case, a sweep. They arrested 2 officers for conspiracy and evidence tampering. They arrested a sergeant from internal affairs for falsifying reports. They served a warrant on the chief's office and walked out carrying boxes. On the courthouse steps, cameras flashed. Not because it was spectacle, because it was a reversal people had been told would never happen. Amina watched from a conference room in the federal building, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Vanessa sat beside her. Other nurses sat nearby. Some held tissues. Some held their hands still to keep them from shaking. Elias stood near the window, watching agents move below like pieces on a board. Vanessa whispered, "I didn't know he was. Your husband." Amina's voice was quiet. "That's the point," she said. "It shouldn't take who he is for this to matter." Vanessa nodded slowly, eyes wet. "But it did," she whispered. Amina didn't deny it. She didn't comfort it away. "It took proof," Amina said, "and it took someone deciding proof mattered." The trial came fast, because the city was on fire in a way leaders couldn't ignore. Not flames. Exposure. Sergeant Cole Rayner sat at the defense table in his suit that didn't fit his shoulders right. The uniform had been taken. The badge was gone. His hair was cut shorter, as if he could shear off what he'd been. He stared at Amina when she entered the courtroom. His eyes were still full of resentment, but it had curdled into something else, something cornered. Amina walked to the witness stand with measured steps. The courtroom smelled of old wood and paper and the faint metallic tang of fear. The judge sat high, face stern, a woman whose gaze didn't soften for authority. Amina placed her hand on the Bible, swore the oath, sat down. The prosecutor began gently, then sharpened. "Ms. Mina Miles," he said. "What was your assignment that night?" "Trauma Bay 3, Amina answered. "A patient hemorrhaging internally." "Was Sergeant Rayner a patient?" "No." "Was he responding to a crime in your bay?" "No." "Did he request your assistance as a medical professional?" "No." "Then, why did he approach you?" Amina's eyes moved briefly to Rayner. He looked away first. "He wanted control," Amina said. "He wanted me to comply with something that had nothing to do with medicine." The defense attorney stood for cross-examination, voice smooth, eyes sharp. "Ms. Miles," he began, "isn't it true you grabbed Sergeant Rayner's wrist?" "I stopped him from grabbing my name tag," Amina replied. "So you admit you made physical contact?" "I prevented interference with patient care," Amina said. The defense attorney smiled thinly. "You're not law enforcement, are you?" "No," Amina said. "You don't get to decide what's lawful." Amina's voice didn't rise. "I know what policy is. I know what assault is. I know what unlawful detention looks like. And I know what it means to turn off a camera in a hallway full of witnesses." The defense attorney's smile faltered. He tried again. "Your husband is Director Miles," he said, a hint of accusation. "Isn't it true you used that to influence this case?" Amina's gaze stayed steady. "I didn't mention my husband," she said. Not once. I asked for the officer's name and badge number. I asked for him to step back so I could treat a bleeding patient. He escalated. The cameras recorded it. The defense attorney's face tightened. But you called him. You summoned him. Amina's voice stayed level. I asked my charge nurse to call my emergency contact, she said. Because I was handcuffed in a parking lot while a patient coded inside. Because I needed someone to ensure evidence wasn't destroyed. The judge leaned forward slightly. Counsel, she said, voice cool, move on. The prosecutor played the hospital video for the jury. The screen showed Rayner's hand yanking Amina away from the bay. It showed Vanessa being shoved. It showed Amina's calm voice stating his badge number request. It showed the moment the body cam went dark, the red light vanishing. In the jury box, faces tightened. A woman swallowed hard. A man's jaw clenched. Rayner watched the footage like it was an enemy. When the prosecutor called the trauma surgeon, the courtroom learned what those seconds meant. Could the interruption have contributed to the patient's crash? The prosecutor asked. The surgeon didn't dramatize. He didn't need to. Yes, he said. In hemorrhagic shock, every second matters. Removing a nurse from a transfusion can destabilize the entire intervention. Rayner's shoulders sagged slightly, as if the weight finally found bone. The verdict came after 1 day of deliberation. Guilty on federal civil rights violation. Guilty on obstruction. Guilty on assault related to the shove and unlawful restraint. Guilty on deprivation of rights under color of law. The courtroom didn't erupt. There was no cinematic gasp. Just a low exhale from the gallery, like a room releasing poison. At sentencing, the judge spoke slowly, each word placed with care. You used your uniform not as a tool of public service, she said, eyes fixed on Rayner, but as a weapon for humiliation. You turned off your camera because you knew what you were doing was wrong. You interfered with medical care. You endangered a life. You did it publicly, with witnesses, and still believed you would be protected. She paused, letting silence deepen. You were not protected, she continued, because protection is not the purpose of law. Accountability is. She sentenced him to federal prison, not months, years. She barred him from any law enforcement role for life. She ordered restitution. She referred additional conduct uncovered during investigation to the U.S. Attorney for further prosecution. Rayner's face went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. The bailiff stepped behind him. When the cuffs clicked on his wrists, the sound was different here than in the parking lot. Here, it was clean, official, final. Outside the courthouse, cameras caught the moment he was led down the steps, head lowered, wrists cuffed, no badge to hide behind. Protesters didn't cheer. They watched, eyes hard, as if they'd learned not to trust joy until it lasted. The systemic fallout did not stop at one man. The Department of Justice announced a pattern and practice investigation into the police department. Federal monitors arrived. Training policies changed. Body camera audits became real. Officers resigned. Some were arrested. A quiet network of protection that had lived in texts and backroom favors was dragged into fluorescent light. The hospital faced its own reckoning. Administration was forced to admit how often staff had been treated like obstacles instead of professionals. Security protocols changed. Nurses were given direct lines to legal counsel. Incident reporting became mandatory, with external oversight. The hospital created a staff protection policy that didn't require bravery to activate only a button. Samuel Decker survived. He left the ICU thin and pale, walking slowly with a nurse at his side. Weeks later, he returned to the hospital with a bouquet of cheap flowers and trembling hands. He asked for Amina by name. When Amina stepped into the lobby, Samuel stared at her wrists as if he could still see the marks through time. I heard, he rasped, voice weak. They told me, you got pulled away because of me. Amina shook her head gently. Not because of you, she said. Because of him. Samuel's eyes filled. Thank you, he whispered, for trying. Amina nodded once. That's the job, she said. He held out the flowers awkwardly. Amina took them. The petals were slightly crushed. They smelled like grocery store water. They still felt heavy in her hands. That night, Amina and Elias sat at their kitchen table. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been since the hospital night. Rain tapped the window softly, a reminder without a threat. Amina rolled down her sleeves and looked at Elias across the table. Her face was tired now. the controlled composure finally allowing exhaustion to show. It shouldn't take your title, she said. Elias's hands rested flat on the wood, palms down, as if steadying himself. It didn't, he said quietly. It took your evidence, your restraint, your refusal to disappear. Amina's gaze sharpened. It took your leverage, she corrected. Elias didn't argue, he nodded slowly. It took what the system respects, he admitted, and that's why the system is being forced to change. Amina's fingers traced a faint line where the cuff mark had been, already fading. The skin was healing. The memory wasn't. Across the city, people went back to work. Nurses returned to fluorescent halls. Parents sent kids to school. Traffic moved. Sirens still sounded. Life kept pressing forward. But something had shifted quietly, irrevocably. A badge no longer felt like a guarantee of immunity in that hospital corridor. A camera no longer felt optional. A complaint no longer felt like a paper tomb. And in the place where humiliation had been staged under harsh lights and public eyes, the consequences had been staged just as visibly clean, legal, irreversible. The night Sergeant Cole Rayner tried to make power out of cruelty, he built his own evidence instead. The hallway he treated like a hunting ground became a record. The cuffs he used for dominance became a prophecy. The silence he counted on became testimony. In the end, the story didn't belong to the uniform or the title. It belonged to what was captured, what was proven, and what was finally enforced when the world refused to look away.